I became more aware of you. It wasn't until when I first saw Purgatory Road, last year. In fact, I had talked to Gary about that film for I think a good period of time. But one of the things he had mentioned before was that in the conversation that I had with him was that I think he had said that he had tried to link you up with Louis Mandler at the time to work together, considering you guys, were both from Australia, and that you guys may find some things you guys might have in common to work on a project together in the future, which ended up being Bring Him Back Dead, which was released not too long ago this year.
Yep.
So with that said, though, the fact that Gary was kind of like really insistent on linking up, you and Lewis, which he has a lot of respect for as well,
yes.
Was something that kind of appealed to me about what it was that he saw in you, and obviously his working relationship with Lewis that he's maintained throughout these years. Really kind of piqued my interest about what it was about you as a director that he actually found really intriguing for him to recommend you to Lewis.
Right.
So with that being said, I looked into your filmography, and I wasn't able to watch all your films that you've done throughout the years, but I have picked out some more of the more recent ones that I have come across here, including Bringing Back Dead. But there's a thing that I actually really wanted to point out here with you that I'm actually a really big fan of you when it comes to the work that you do when it comes to your films that I've come across here so far. So I've seen 5 so far: Stress to Kill, Painkiller, Heroes Wanted, which I think had a different name overseas somewhere. I think it might have been like Sensitive.
Oh, you mean Hitman's Hero?
Yeah, I saw that movie too.
Oh yeah, you mean you said Heroes Wanted.
I'm sorry, I meant to say Hitman's Hero. My apologies. Yes.
Yeah,
so
Hitman's Hero. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I think it had a different name overseas as well too, if I recall correctly.
Sensitive New Age Killer.
That's right. And then I ended up watching. What else did I miss? Obviously Purgatory Road, Hitman's Hero. So yeah, just all those 5 of those films here. So the most consistent thing that I have picked up with your films, especially ones that you are more or less writing, is that because I've heard several conversations you've had in the past where the one thing that I actually picked up on Purgatory Road and then kind of confirmed it for me, what you had a conversation not too long ago where he had brought up that you have a background with psychology, where you understand how people think and why they think the way they do, behave the way that they do. And I actually see that reflected in a lot of the work you do, especially the films that you have written. So in particular with Purgatory Road and obviously Stress to Kill and Painkiller and so on. So I was actually really curious about, there's a lot that you have shared. So I'm trying to figure out what I can try to filter out to ask you that doesn't get repetitive here. But what I'm actually really interested is that because you have been able to actually, I think in my mind, in my perspective, you've been really successful in showcasing a lot of the struggles that the characters you've written, especially when it came to some of them, like situations like, let's say, for example, like Painkiller, which I know a lot of it had to do with Tom Parnell's real life scenario that he had with his son. That was more or less kind of the inspiration for the story that I know you also partake in as well too, to try to formulate the story and getting the reasons for why, in this case, Bill Obert's character does what he does to be able to deal with the loss of his daughter and then be able to find a way to justify the means, which is a very questionable thing, but it's also a reasonable one as well too, considering the circumstances. But that's something that I always felt like you've done very well when it came to your story. So my official question to you really is, and I apologize, elongated question, but is that when you first started writing, I'm not sure if that's something that you had figured out that you wanted to do very early on, or if that's something you have progressed along the way that you figured out this is more or less my bread and butter of what I think works best to tell the story through my sensibilities, if you will.
Yeah, I would say that my chief interest is in looking at the inconsistency of human behavior. You take like animals are very consistent. And it also has to do something with, they've got, a different type of brain, you could say in some extent limited brain capacity, but then there's also things animals can do that we can't do. So it's not completely relevant. But, I'm interested in the inconsistency of human behavior in how people relate to each other, because I think most of the conflict between people comes from that lack of consistency in behavior.
Right. And
we all deal with it all the time because we're dealing with people all the time. And often where things break down is because someone loses their consistency. They might be, for example, reliable up to a certain point. All of a sudden something happens, sort of freaks you out. It's like, gee, where the hell did that come from? Like something, right out of the blue. And so the human behavior aspect to me is really what I'm most interested in. And the genre that you choose to examine that is, in a way, to me, more like the picture frame that you choose. So the genre could be, you can tell, for example, a story about brothers where there's a dominant brother and there's a submissive brother,
Right.
like, for example, in Purgatory. But that can also be told in a Western genre.
Right.
It can also be told, in a science fiction film. So you've got science fiction trappings. I mean, when you look at most genres, what makes them a genre is the actual trappings. Science fiction, you've got like either set on other planets or exploring very, concepts that may affect the future. You're exploring in horror, concepts of, life and death. You also have aspects like, monsters. You have transformation. Ultimately, though, it's still about behavior. So it's very universal in what you're exploring. And I don't think it really matters what genre it is that I think the strength of any script comes in getting into the psychology of the characters, obviously establishing the psychology and looking at their past and their present, which always influences the future. But when you put two forces together, like two personalities together that have come from different places and have varying histories, that's often where the conflict comes in. And the inconsistency in human behavior comes from people being unable to cope with the unexpected. People are often very, very much programmed to deal with things. Say if you're going to the same job every day and you're dealing with the same issues, you can deal with the issues every day because they're associated with your job. So you get used to dealing with certain issues. But if you suddenly get thrown a real spanner, which that's why it's called spanner in the works, we get thrown a spanner, sometimes we're unable to cope with the changes. We're unable to cope with something different. It happens in relationships too. You could pick the same kind of people all the time. From that, you get the same kind of problems. If you don't want to have those problems, you can pick someone who's different than what you would normally choose. But then that also has its own unique problems that you haven't dealt with before. So you may be able to deal with issues that are related to a certain personality type. But if you pick someone who's a different personality type, the upside is that that personality could actually be positive for you in the long run. The downside is that you're going to have to negotiate the variables of that personality because it's something that's new for you. It's not programmed, and it's something that you have to learn. So I think just having an understanding of human programming and that aspect of what makes us human. I mean, obviously, our human brain, because we're able to consider options, is something that also causes us a lot of issues because we have free will. Animals have the will to like go left or right, but ultimately, if you throw a dog a bone, it's going to go and get the bone.
Right.
It also knows that you are the center of its existence because you feed the dog and you put a shelter on the dog. But humans don't work like that because their brain is more complex. So to me, that's one of the most important parts of drama, that you've got to embed those aspects first. You've got to establish that psychology. And I think once you establish that, that's where the drama grows from.
So this is a question that I was actually curious to ask with you because I do agree when you said I love how you explained it, where you said that telling the story through a genre is like pretty much putting on a picture frame. But have you ever felt with any particular script you wrote specifically where it's going to be a genre film that I wouldn't say may have like made it difficult to be able to tell the story the way that you'd want to because of the genre? Because I'm wondering if you've ever had those kind of issues where I have a great idea for a story, but the only way I can tell the story is, and that get the film fun, if I do it through, let's say, in the form of a horror film, but it doesn't really have to be a horror film. But if I add those horror elements to it, it's one of the ways that I can get the film made, but it doesn't work that way for me to tell this story. So, I mean, I'm hoping the question makes sense, but I mean, did you have little moments like that where you realize, where you feel like this genre doesn't fit the story, even though you can tell virtually any story within your genre? But I'm wondering if there's some sort of like hindrance that might come along the way because of the genre and the story you actually want to tell. So yeah, I hope the question made sense.
No, I think that's a great question.
Okay.
Yeah, I've I've had situations where I've had the initial story in terms of what character, what a character wants, another character stopping them from getting what they want, the general dynamic. And I would definitely say that the genre that you choose to tell the story in, generally sort of, I think, comes pretty naturally to you. So my point is, a lot of stories can be told, the basic universal, twos and fros of the story can be told, in different genres. But I definitely think that there are genres that work best for the ideas, because sometimes certain genres may also be distractions from the story that you're trying to tell. Like, for example, if you want to relate it to some of my stories, say, okay, the Purgatory Road story, which is a story of two brothers, as you very rightly synopsized it as. And I was really glad to hear that, because even some distributors have said to me, it's not really fully a horror film. It's more a drama. And initially when they say that to me, I think they think that I might be offended by that, but not at all. I mean,
Okay.
that's obviously, a distributor can use a particular genre to market the movie.
Right.
Obviously marketing works well when the genre is at least identified,
Right.
because it means that the distributor can go, we sell it then to the audience for this film. So it's much better than just saying, oh, this is a drama and the genre is irrelevant. The genre is not irrelevant, but I agree with you that certain genres will bring out certain stories best.
Right.
I don't think this story would have worked well in space, because it's a fairly intimate story. So if you said it like on a say, for example, on a 50-year voyage to the Andromeda galaxy or something like that, it wouldn't have worked it wouldn't have worked. I mean, certainly in a literal sense, but even if you'd made it about one brother with certain intentions finds that after a while, the two brothers are at loggerheads about what they both want, and both of their moral compasses being like quite different. That's in a way like a more general sense of what's going on in the movie. But to personalize it, to me, the genre that I chose for this movie, I think works well to personalize it, because it is a very personal story. And the reason it works in the horror genre is because it is about murder.
Right.
It is about, to some extent, also there's a cannibalism thread in it as well.
Yeah.
So it's actually, because the cannibalism thread feeds into the concept of eating sinners,
Right.
that's someone literally eating the sinners.
Yeah.
So again, that would not have worked as well transferred into another genre, because you would have had to find something else that would have sort of stood in symbolically for, the sinners, or eating the sinners.
To basically interpret and translate the story fitting. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So this genre works better, because I think in a way could be a little bit more literal, but hopefully without being heavy-handed.
So this actually gives me a question. It leads me to a question that I was asking, because I wanted to ask you about this here specifically, because you brought something up about how because you talked about this before, about how you talk with certain distributors and how they've shared their opinions on the film and what they want and so on. And it's obviously a constant struggle, because for you to get the film funded and be able to get distributed, you have to meet certain criteria along the way. But I'm wondering, because I've actually been able to talk to several filmmakers, and one of the most consistent things that I've come across is that it's very hard to sell a film without a particular genre behind it. So in other words, like, if you want to make a movie, but it's a horror film, then we can sell that movie. If you want to make an action film, then we can sell that movie. It can be about anything, but we can sell it because there is a market out there for that. I won't go into specific, but I've talked to several people who, I was curious about if there's any ideas that they've had that doesn't necessarily fit the genre criteria, but I mean, it has obviously various influences from various genres, but it's not a genre film per se, because the story may deal with something a little bit more realistic in terms of like what the story you want to tell, but then you have some certain heightened reality aspect of it too, but it fits it fits along with what the story is meant to be, how it's meant to be told. But if you would describe the film to a distributor, they're going to ask, well, what genre does it fall under here? And if you tell them, well, it doesn't fall under any particular genre, it's about X, Y, and Z, but I've got the money and I've got the actors involved, and these are high caliber actors that I'm funding myself. So I've done most of the work, but can you distribute the movie? Then in most cases, I would think that would be easier, but sometimes it's still not. That's not enough to convince the distributors that yes, we can still sell the film because you've got the money in place, you've got the actors who are well-known actors, but we can't sell the film now because we don't know how to distribute the movie because it doesn't fall under those criteria that we have for us to be able to sell the film in these various markets, because these movies that you want to make don't sell very well, even though if you have a well-known name actor. So
Right.
my question to you about that is, because of your experiences with, talking with distributors, because you worked with distributors before, Orion Pictures way back in the day. So you have some insight about that, but I'm sure you clearly see how things have changed along the way. But do you ever think that there's going to come to a point where the genre doesn't necessarily have to be the selling point to sell the film to the various markets? You think in time the audience will be wise enough to know that it's got a good actor, this sounds like a good story, I'm going to watch it, I don't care what the genre is?
That's an interesting question because it actually addresses something that's a big frustration to me at the moment, that in a way, the question about whether there would be a time when it's sold more by a story rather than falling under a genre, because by saying it's a certain genre, it gives a distributor an assurance that there's going to be certain tropes that they can, that they can market or exploit, which is why they're called exploitation films.
Right.
So, those, for example, you say horror, straight away they're going to either go scary, jump scares, ghosts, gore, murders, spooky stuff, dark, creepy, right. Like they can sort of expect that those at a minimum are going to be part of it, the same way that if you say sci-fi film or science fiction film, other planets, outer space, obviously there's some sci-fi that's none of those. That's more about the science fiction of the head as well,
right.
Or robots, interactions with computers, or interactions with AI kind of like ciphers, that type of thing. But
right.
Yeah, I think the issue is at the moment is actually not even so much that a genre can sell a film, because you've also got a couple of things to reckon with when you make a movie. And it's not so much whether a distributor will distribute a movie, it's whether a distributor will be able to make enough revenue on the movie
mm-hmm.
for you to make your money back or break even. And on top of that, whether you're going to get with the distributor who's even going to be honest about the money that they make.
True.
So you're dealing with those issues on top of the issues of will you distribute the movie. Look, you can, in some platforms now, you can actually pretty much put your own movie up on certain platforms.
Right.
Not all, because
right.
to get onto some platforms, you need a distributor or you need what's known as like, an aggregator.
Right.
So the aggregator is going to be the person that becomes the middleman that takes your movie, and that the distributor or the streamer, they obviously just don't like dealing with people singly each time they don't want to have brand new relationships with every single filmmaker. So that's why they have aggregator relationships.
Right.
It's a good and a bad thing, because on one side it means that the distributor is dealing with a known quantity when they're dealing with their aggregator. But on the same side, the filmmaker then loses some of the independence and autonomy that you would have if you could just go straight to, say, Amazon, or you could go straight to, Netflix. You're not able to do that predominantly. I mean, the rules change all the time too.
Right.
But I would say one of the biggest problems right now is actually not so much the genre, but it's that distributors are at a certain genre, and the stuff I make, it's not super low budget, but it's certainly not high budget. It's kind of like high. It's a high end of the low and maybe low end of the medium. So in those budgets, you've got from distributors I would call it, a fixation and obsession with names. And I was told, not too long ago, that we'd rather have a shitty film with a great name than a great film than with no name.
Yeah.
So from a filmmaker's point of view, that's not something that makes you, leap for joy and say, well, that's fantastic. They don't really care about a good movie. They just want a movie with a name. Because the whole point of a name is that, and when we say name, it's also questionable from month to month, like who is a name?
Right.
Because like I've worked with amazing actors who are, some of them have been what you would call a name. Some of them have not been what a distributor would call a name, but often they're a better actor than the so-called names.
Right.
So to say someone's a name or not a name, it's really no judgment at all on their abilities as an actor or their ability to be amazing on screen, because I'm always really prefer amazing on screen. I mean, that's what I prefer. So the issue becomes then with this obsession with names is that you realize that a lot of the time they don't have a great deal of interest so much in the subject or the genre. Their first question is, who is in the movie? And well, I'm sure we've all seen examples of seeing really crappy movies with good names and go, my God, I can't believe that person was in that movie. Well, you realize they're in it because they're getting a very good day rate. And also the distributor, they've got to earn a living, and the distributor approve them. They're not approving cast based on script. They're approving cast based on the names. They're approving a movie based on the name that's in the movie. And, to some extent, the genre is simply, there are certain, more, I would say, viable commercial genres, and probably the most viable commercial genre right now in international marketplace is probably action.
Yeah.
And then horror. I'd say horror is probably slightly less dependent on names, but action is still very, very dependent on names. And action generally, it's harder to make a really low budget action film. It's easier to make a lower budget horror film, but I'm not saying in any way that any film is easy to make well, because it's not.
Right.
To make anything well is not an easy feat, and it shouldn't be. And of course, the physics of it is going to be, if something is that easy to make, then it's probably not that great. I mean, it's especially to get really good production values on films where the budgets, are challenged, it takes a lot of skill. And you'd probably make sure that you hire a really good crew, because they're going to have to make something look like it's worth 5 times more than you actually spent on it. Right. Whereas if you've got people who are being paid really, really, big rates, well, of course it's going to look good. A $50 million movie should look good. There should be no excuse why that doesn't look good. But if you're doing lower budget movies, the look of it is definitely a factor for distributors. But I've even seen more examples of movies with names that still are pretty poor. They still don't look that great. I mean, there's a certain actor, we probably know who this is, who recently retired from making action movies.
Yeah. I was going to bring him up too.
And it was kind of sad. And what was very sad is that, you look at, say, the last, 3 or 4 films that were made. I imagine most of the films that he was in are out now. Maybe there's still a couple.
Yeah.
But most of these were, a lot of those films were certainly not bigger budget films. They look like all the money probably went to him. Mm-hmm. And then the rest went to making the movie. But, some of them I was surprised by how just low rent they looked. And I don't mean low rent in that, they look, that a low budget film should look low budget, because it doesn't have to. I mean, I've made films that I would hopefully think that still don't look low budget, but because, I go to a lot of trouble. But some of these really look like they probably had decent money, but it looks like they literally just went, okay, we don't really care what it looks like. We don't care about the special effects. Let's just get this film out into the market. And so there's almost like 2 industries out there. There's an industry of people who see it very much as product.
Right.
As, let's get the actor in there, let's churn it out. And certain actors, they can churn out, whereas when you're doing lower budget movies that you don't have, say, like someone who had the gravity of someone like, our friend, Mr. Willis, then there's almost more obligation that on the lower budget filmmaker to really try a lot harder because you can't rest on the name you have.
So this is an interesting question for me to ask here because I've been very fortunate to talk with a lot of filmmakers and actors that have worked on projects that majority of people don't know exist. Like, so I'm going to give two examples here, and I'm bringing this up for a reason because there's something that I had the opportunity to speak with the filmmakers about the projects that I've have come across, and in a lot of ways, when I pointed it out to them, they're surprised that I even discovered it in the first place.
Right, right.
But with that being said, though, so like the first example I'm going to bring up is that there's a short film that I've come across by chance last year called Frog, and the reason I came across that movie is because I was trying to do a research for an actor who I did interview by the name of Tom Hallam, who I was trying to find something that I could use to like kind of what I'm doing with you right now, trying to kind of use this gateway here. But when I came across the short film Frog on YouTube, I reached out to him. I was like, I found this movie. This movie is amazing. It's a short, it's like 11-minute movie. It is beautifully shot. It is beautifully acted. It's a powerful story, and I still watch it to this day because it's one of the most amazing short films. I wouldn't say short film, but just amazing films I've ever seen, and really in the last 10 years or so. So I was blown away that no one has ever heard of this movie, and it is done beautifully. I know it's a low budget film. I did talk to the director of the movie, who also wrote the film as well, and Patricia Aiken, and I was blown away like this. And then she gave me the opportunity to read the full script to the actual story in itself, and it's even better than what we got in the short film.
Right.
And I was like, how are you not able to get this movie made in the first place? And so that she revealed to me the things that she was going through at the time. And then there's another project I came across to a production company by the name of Outsiders Production, who I spoke with the crew, and I also spoke with the one of the lead actors who directed the entire series of this show called Rough Cut, which is basically done virtually with no money. But when you look at the final product, it is 10 times better than a lot of mainstream stuff we come across here. And it is available for free on YouTube. And I remember thinking, like, how has no one ever seen this as well too? Because this is beautiful stuff. So so the thing is that the question I'm trying to lead to is this, because I've come across those projects, and yes, they've some way they kind of come up with money to be able to get certain things they need, and then a lot of it was a lot of favors as well. But then I noticed too that like, I'm going to use Scott Adkins as an example, because one thing that he always brings up in virtually every single film that he's about to make is that there was a period of time where his films were very well received. They are still well received, but then people would just steal the movie, downloading illegally, and then not pay to watch the film. And then as a result of that, the next budget, the sequel to that upcoming movie, the budget went down. The schedule got shorter, and they had to pretty much, I wouldn't say rush through it, but they had to work harder to get the film done to the highest potential, and hopefully make it even better. And then the next thing would happen where the distributor says, hey, we want to make a third film, but can you make it for less money and for a shorter schedule as well too? And and what the question I'm trying to ask is that when I hear these stories of, in this case, the two people that I spoke with, and for Guys and the Outsiders and Patricia, about their respective work, you hear their stories and you hear how they were able to do the films in a short span of time, or maybe a lengthy period of time, but you don't notice because it's all been edited so well and been crafted so well. But then you look at films like, in some cases with Scott Adkins, not all his movies, but some of them, where you can tell that the quality went down a little bit, but the story is amazing. But you can tell that there's a restriction in the production that was available in the second film that's not available in the third movie, and so on and so forth. So the question I was trying to ask you was that when you hear these stories and you listen to the various people that I'm sure you've come across here that have told you what the issues are, which is pretty much consistent from what I'm hearing almost with everybody, unless you're like some high caliber talent where, I wouldn't say it's easier, but maybe it is easier than most other people. But when you hear these stories about how we can fund the film for you, but we can only do it for this amount of money and for this amount of time, are you willing to do it? Because that's one thing that I'm not sure I'm sure you know who he is, Jesse B. Johnson, where he had talked about, where he had said that when he was offered to do Accident Man 2, he's like, I would have wanted to have done it, but these type of films are very difficult, not a lot of money, and he was at a point now where his career where he's been able to get more work, more money, more time for his productions, that he ended up
Yes.
going down that route, which I think is justifiably so for him. And then, when and I love the fact that he was very honest about that as well too. And that's the thing that I don't think a lot of people truly do understand when it comes to the hardships. He got lucky, and rightfully so. But hearing that made me realize that, okay, so there is some hardness that I didn't really fully understand, that I've heard from Scott, but I didn't hear from the direct. Now hearing from the director's perspective here too. It's a elongated question, but I'm curious to see about how you look at how things have changed along the way when it comes to the relationship with the talent, and then it comes to the distributor, the investors, where it's, Action Man 2 had just come out. It's a much bigger film, and I'm hoping it's doing very well as well too. But when you hear Scott's story and then you hear Jesse's story as well too, is that something you notice is very consistent with virtually everybody that you come across here in the industry when it comes to their struggles, and then seeing some people get very lucky where they're able to walk away from the low budget films to that in that capacity, and then work on something much more sustainable where they can money's guaranteed, the talent's guaranteed, therefore the production and the schedule is also guaranteed as well too? Or is it a fickle thing where it's inconsistent and everyone's story is slightly different, but the struggle is always the same no matter what?
Yeah. Firstly, I like Jesse's films a lot.
Yeah, same here.
And same with Scott. I think the last I actually went to one of the screenings of the Debt Collector that they had in LA. Like one of the, I think it was like a cast crew screening. Actually, it was all finished and all that. But yeah. Like really like him a lot. Love Scott Adkins films too. Also love Scott's. I used to watch some of Scott's. I know he does those little video vlogs and too. Where he like interviews.
The art of action. Yeah.
Like I love that because I love seeing someone who's an actor, but he's also you can see he's a true fan.
Yeah.
And that's great. I would say yes. I mean, it's a sort of business that, because it's very fragmented now, is that it used to be, for example, a much narrower path. Because, for example, one of my mentors in Australia was a director named Richard Franklin, right? So I knew Richard quite well, and he was very, very helpful to me early in my career. And, the trajectory back in those days was you make a few low budget movies, and then he got a call from, literally from an agent in Hollywood, do you want to come over here and make a film? And he ended up coming over and making Psycho 2. Mm-hmm. He already had some relationship here with UCLA. So he went to film school there. But, there was a very almost like a career path that was like, make a few low budget movies, and then you get offered bigger budget movies, because back then there weren't as many films being made, because this is when films were made on film.
Right.
So it's a lot more expensive to make films on film. So you didn't have the market so crowded with movies that were shot on celluloid, because people couldn't afford it.
Right.
Back in those days, you're spending about $1,000 per 10 minutes to make a film, per 10 minutes of shooting. And so that means even if you shoot an 80-minute film on a 1-to-1 ratio, that's $8,000. It's a 10-to-1 ratio, that's $80,000. That's just for stock and processing. So it was a very different approach. Now it's more like there's so much stuff coming out that, as you said, you're talking about the film Frog, and also you were saying you hadn't seen it, and I've heard of Frog, I haven't seen it, but this is how films get known, but they don't get known in the old traditional way of, they go into a system and they move up the chain. Like you look, for example, the director of Die Hard, John McTiernan, he got Die Hard because Joel Silver happened to watch Nomads, his first film. Now, the chances these days that someone like a Joel Silver will watch a low budget film, either made by myself or Jesse or 50 other people,
right?
Very unlikely, because everything is just so much fragmented, and there's so much material out there now that people also find it hard to even sort like the good stuff from the bad stuff. So I find a lot of the time there just isn't even as much awareness and curiosity of what people are doing. I mean, I've even had a few people say to me, people who've watched Purgatory Road and liked it, and they're like, oh my God, I saw that film. and they'll say things which, it's nice to say, but it's kind of naive. Oh my God, I saw that film. How come you're not doing films for Blumhouse? And it's kind of like, it just doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? Because Blumhouse are doing their films, but also whoever they're hiring is coming through who the agents and the management companies they deal with, who is being pushed to them. They can only be aware of so much going on. So there's a point that obviously any particular company is only going to be aware, unless of course you make a film that absolutely gets a lot of, say national attention, like, a couple of weeks ago, Terrifier 2, right?
Right.
Got a lot of attention. Yeah. But there's lots of films, and I enjoyed Terrifier 2 for what it was. It was a nice, gory, good time. But the whole point is there's lots of amazing movies that are made all the time. I mean, one of my favorite superhero films no one's hardly heard of is a film called Boy Wonder. Whenever
I have that movie.
Yeah. Whenever someone says to me, what's your favorite superhero films? And I said, well, actually, one of them is kind of like a low budget movie. Yeah. But, Boy Wonder is a really amazing movie. I really love that. And that almost got no attention at all. Yeah. Almost nobody has seen that movie.
Yeah.
But it's great. And so you come to the point that, so how do you get to a point when people go, we want to hire you just as a director, and producers come to you, because it used to be, we like what you did with this, we like what you did with that. But I find a lot of producers are not even necessarily producers who can even see the difference between this is great for low budget and, you appreciate the job you did. Because a lot of producers are not necessarily coming even from production. Some of them are more likely to hire someone who did a YouTube video that got 2 million views. And that's what's kind of changed. You know what I mean? So the pool of where people get hired from is very different. At a very early stage in my career, I just knew that it was important that I also learn to raise money, because I didn't want to be someone who had to go begging to producers all the time with a script, going, oh, can I send you my script? Because in the early days, I'd send someone a script, and even if they liked it, they said, well, we've already got 5 films in the pipeline at the moment. Maybe a couple of years, we might take a look at yours. But, production companies have often got a bunch of scripts of their own that they want to do. And that's fair enough, because most production script companies are comprised of writers, like the main producer and director, whatever, they might be writers, so they've got their own projects. So, because I also get sent scripts from people who say to me, would you help me finance this? Whereas I have to tell them, look, it's hard enough for me to finance films. If I was in a position where I was able to finance other people's films, in addition to my own, I would. But that it's not easy to get finance, and I mean, I've got my ways for doing it, but also, my abilities to finance are an ability that stops at a certain budget. Or sometimes, you can finance something and meet someone else who goes, well, if you get this amount of money, that will then trigger this amount if you shoot it in Canada or Australia, whatever. So, I mean, most financing is not as straightforward as it seems, which is always often why you see, 10 producers, even 50 producers, because now you've got, crowd-funded films. So that model's different again.
Right.
So I would just say that, it's just very, very hard to get noticed no matter what you do, or unless you make something that's an absolute freak of nature in terms of film and just gets massive amount of attention by winning a prize at like a key festival. And when I say key, I mean absolute key festival, like Toronto
or Cannes,
or maybe Sitges. But even like Sitges, a lot of people don't even know Sitges unless they're in the horror community. But definitely like Cannes, Berlin. I mean, there's probably 5 or 6 what you would call huge festivals that people take notice of. But it's very hard to get regular genre films into most of those festivals unless the producer has been associated with something else. Like, for example, a few years ago, the Maniac remake played
with
Cannes.
Elijah Wood. Yeah.
So you go, my God, how the hell did that get into direct? Or it was either in Director's Fortnight or what it was. But, that's not really because Cannes wanted to screen the Maniac remake. The guy, number one, it's got Elijah Wood in it.
Right.
And it's also the producer of that film had won an Academy Award for another film. It was that film that came out several years earlier. It was kind of like a silent. Sort of
The Artist?
Black and white. Yes.
The Artist.
The producer is a producer of that. So because I remember people saying, "Oh, this is great," Khan's now kind of really getting behind films like Maniac. I said, no, it doesn't mean they're getting behind that any more than the Academy is getting behind really amazing Korean films like Parasite. The reason Parasite got attention because it's distributed by Sony.
Right.
They're just not picking a film that had a small indie distributor in Korea. Sony is a key component of the making of that movie. So the thing is, so it doesn't necessarily show a change in what's going on because everything is very, very still centralized. And I still believe that things are very much gate kept, because, there's a certain power base and the certain power base anoints certain films and gets behind certain films. And yeah, if you stand out, they can't help but contact you, but they're contacting you because you made some extraordinary amount of money for a small investment. So they want a piece of that pie. I mean, that's what drives that part of the business. So, as filmmakers, you're a business person on one side, but then when you step onto the set, you're more, that's your artistic side. That's where you get to make the art, but you've got to construct it within the business, but you then make it in the art. So you use the business to build the opportunity. And this is why I produce as well, because the business side helps create the opportunity to make the movie. And then I make the movie as a director.
Do you think that, because you've talked about it before in the past, how the business side of the filmmaking process is one of the harshest things that a filmmaker can go through, but in a lot of ways it's kind of like a necessary evil. But do you think having gone through that as well too, at any point do you feel like it had actually made you a better storyteller in terms of directing, writing, seeking out talent, whatever the case may be, for you to be more cognizant of some things that you probably were not looking at before, but once you started getting into the business and you started noticing what's a priority in this business sense, that okay, well then I have to restructure certain things for me to be able to tell these stories a way that could fit those criterias. But I'm wondering along the way if it may have actually helped you along the way to become better at what you do as far as writing, directing, and whatever the case may be.
Yeah. I think that developing a kind of like a discipline in that business area carries over to the discipline in other areas. It's like, for example, on a film I did not too long ago, which is coming out reasonably soon, called Hell's Coming for You. On that one, we had a lot of people on shoot. Like some of them were, a lot of crew were had military backgrounds. They were the best crew members, because people with military or say police backgrounds, that kind of thing.
Right.
People with military backgrounds they're very organized. They're very disciplined. They're also very good at, for example, taking orders. And I don't mean that in a, like a bossy,
right.
way. But I just mean if you say this needs to be done, they're right. Yes, I'll do that. And they go and do it. So they bring that discipline to the filmmaking process. And there was, I reckon, 4 or 5 crew members, as opposed to some other crew members who I would say, wouldn't necessarily hire again, because those people with a military background were just such a joy to work with because they were able to basically take a task, carry out a task, and they brought that discipline of the military to the making of a film. And, a film, in order to operate effectively, a film is like a military operation. It's a big tank moving forward, and you sort of got to make sure that everything's being done, everything's being followed up, and there's no room for people to be really getting taking things too personally. There's no room to be too emotional about stuff. You really just got to get stuff done and worry about the other stuff later on. So I think also my approach, the business side. Because, I never really initially came into it to do that, even though the very first film I ever made and got financed was something that, I certainly was producing that as well, but it was more just by default because I just happened to know someone who had equipment at a place I was working, and I convinced them. You've probably heard that story.
Yeah, I've heard that story. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Good. This is for the movie Marauders, you're talking about here.
Marauders, yeah.
Marauders, yes, thank you.
So I would say, though, that when you're sort of aware of the way that the business works, it also helps you in a way to kind of like streamline some, even like whether it's a casting. And also I think it even brings a sense of discipline more to the script because, you're making something that also the script has got to work for everybody involved. Like when you write a script and present a script in a well formatted way, there's a reason why it's got to be well formatted, because it's not just the actors who are reading it, it's also being read by a production manager who's going to break it down, that's why the scenes are numbered, so they can do a schedule from it. You've got line producers, you've got a lot of different people who are using that script to build the project as an entity, and everybody is going to contribute to it in different ways, with the script being the script being the, what would we call it, like the ignition point that fires off everything else and gets the casting happening, the locations happening and all that. And I would say definitely that when I'm kind of aware of I've gone through the budget, I've raised a certain amount of money, and also it's also an awareness of what is this film worth internationally, conservatively. So making sure that you make that kind of film for less than that, because you're not going to make a certain genre film if someone says, well, conservatively this is worth, say, $1 million or 5 million worldwide. You're not then going to go out and make a $30 million movie, because that'd be foolish, because that'd put you $25 million in the hole. So the thing is, you'd rather go, okay, if I know it's worth that much, I'll try to make it for half that, and then if we basically then hit our target, we've doubled the budget. So the investor's happy, the distributor's happy, and then everybody is happy. The main I'd say eye-opening aspect of making movies, from when I went from making Super 8 movies, which was pure joy because it wasn't a business thing, to going into the business, was just the awareness that you've got to embrace the business side, and if you don't, you either won't work very often, or you'll just be incredibly frustrated and always at the whims of other people for them to raise money for you. So it's either you find someone who you can work with, which is also hard to do, or you learn to do things. I mean, finding a team is I'd say, especially a partner in terms of producing. For example, when Tarantino started out, he had Lawrence Bender as his producing partner, and they made several films together. I don't think they make films anymore together, but they got to a certain point. So finding someone like that is probably as difficult as finding a romantic partner. It's or a wife or a husband. Because because you are like married to that person. It's not just a couple of hours a day. You are having phone calls at midnight, and you're dealing with dramas. I mean, I have a producer at the moment who I'm working with quite a bit, Jeff Miller, and the two of us have become some, good friends, and, been working well. It's been working very well, because we just happen to have the right sensibilities. So he produced Bring It Back Dead, and which I was exec producer on, and so I brought something to the movie and directed the movie, but it's always advantageous, and part of your business approach is being able to, cast people. And I don't just mean casting actors, but every single person you're working with, essentially it's a casting process, deciding whether you can work with them or not.
Do you think you've gotten better as being more of a businessman or more of an artistic, or as an artist, and I'm including, writing, directing, producing, all the whole bit as far as the filmmaking process is concerned. So do you feel like you've gotten better one over the other, or you think you're kind of like at an even keel with both sides of the industry as far as your artistic endeavors are concerned, and then the business side of it as well too? Like, do you feel like you have one that's more than the other as far as how you feel you've gotten better at?
Excuse me. I would just say this. I don't really enjoy the business side of it.
Right.
To me, it's essential. But I don't. I'm not the kind of person. I'm not even the kind of person who, when I get something financed, I'll jump up and down and have a beer and and go to a brothel and celebrate and get drunk with a bunch of prostitutes. I'm not necessarily that kind of person. I am the kind of person though who on the shoot, I'll work with an actor and do a good scene, or a scene I'm feeling really good about. I feel an incredible high from that, or sitting in an edit suite. But I mean, I would certainly say as a business person, I've got like a much more solid understanding of the way that the business works, even though it changes all the time, because
Right.
it's, you can sort of go, there's never a point when you go, I totally get it. It's more like you're saying, I get it right now. I mean, you don't want to overthink. You don't want to overthink or think you've got a handle on anything, because you're an idiot if you do that, because eventually something changes. So
Right.
it's more like having a handle on, okay, I've got a handle on what's going on right now. But it's always an educational process. But in terms of directing, I would say that I hope that I'm a better director now. I mean, I think I certainly understand what works and what doesn't work on screen better, because I've had more experiences going from script to screen. Because I think there's certain things you'll never understand about directing, just writing. And even if you're a would-be director, you're trying to get a project up, there's certain things you'll never understand about the writing of a script unless you've seen the script that you've written on a screen, because it tells you everything about what works and what doesn't, which is, just simple things like, for example, I had in my film Sensitive New Age Killer, when I made it, I remember there was a Q&A we had when the film got released. It did a pretty big theatrical release in Australia. And I remember doing a Q&A before one of the preview screenings. No, sorry, after the screening. And someone said to me, oh, why was Paul's wife, why did he go to, Paul's the main character who's a married guy.
Yeah.
Why does he go and meet his own wife in a hotel room and has sex with her in there? And I said, he doesn't go and meet his wife in a hotel room. That's the cop he goes and meets in the hotel room. And they said, oh, because I thought it was his wife. And then I thought about it, and I thought to myself, something? The fact that this person has that problem with the film, or has that question, shows a failing on my part. And the failing is, I didn't make the two women dissimilar enough for people who've never watched the film in the first place. So it was a good lesson. And the lesson was that if I'd cast that movie again, the wife would be a brunette, the cop would probably be like a blonde or a redhead. Little things like that make a big difference. One other thing, just while I'm on this, I remember, for example, in the edit, had, very good editor, Tony Egan, who I was working with, and Robin Brennan. And I remember at one point, Tony goes, I've cut out some of the scenes where Paul tells his wife that he loves her. And at first I was like, oh, why did you cut those out? And anyway, but then of course, when I watched it with all the scenes where he keeps saying, I love you to his wife, when you've got someone saying, I love you to a woman on the big screen 5 times, after the second time, that's enough. After 5 times, it's like, why the hell do you keep saying this? Whereas when you write it on the page, it doesn't have the same weight as it does on the screen. And it's kind of interesting when you see things while you're writing, it's really interesting how things that you think don't have any weight, as much weight on a page, are very, very heavy on the screen.
Interesting.
And that's something you never learn unless you've written the script and you're able to sit with an audience or an audience of people watching the rough cut and looking at that and going, something, we don't need to say that. So that was one lesson that I never after that ever had someone express something like that again, more than say once or twice, because unless of course they're playing a psycho who keeps expressing it and, has other reasons, other reasons for doing it. But yes, right. But I would say my understanding of scripts, also understanding of things that don't need dialogue, because that's one of the main things you start doing also, I think, the longer you do it, that you get on the set and you start going, those 3 lines that you had, just look at him. Because especially if you cast someone who's a really good actor,
right?
There's stuff sometimes that you go, it's really kind of superfluous and redundant for you to say those lines. The audience already knows how you're feeling. Why are you saying that? So just look. And that's the stuff that you start knowing once you've actually made a few movies, because you've seen how stuff translates onto the screen.
Do you ever feel like, even now, because you've been doing this for quite a few decades at this point, but when you start going through, because, you talked about the changes, what you pointed out before about how you don't want to be comfortable thinking, how things are in reality, they're always going to be constantly changed up, because the industry has changed tremendously. That's literally in the last 10 years. Where before certain things that weren't as accessible are now more accessible now. So for a number of different reasons here, but because of the constant change that you're seeing as far as distributions and filmmaking and the genres or whatever the case may be, when you start making a movie or when you're shooting a film, do you ever start to question about I guess from more like a business perspective, where you realize that, okay, so I like the idea that I have, but the artist in me knows that it's not going to work well for the business side of it here, because even though we've agreed that we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, I know this will not work to make the film appealing to an audience, which we have to appeal to because of the distributors are expecting that. So my question is more about like how you start to juggle that artistic side of it during the production, and then also the business side of it during the production. And then when you come to the point of the editing, whether you have everything you want as far as what you shot, but then you're starting to splice it all together to make it more in line with your point of view as far as your artistic version of it, and more the business side of it as well too. Because I'm wondering if you have a little bit of conflict about what you're having to tell from the business perspective, as far as as well as the artist perspective as well too, and then where you come in the middle to be able to tell both sides of that vision, if you will, to be able to please yourself and then please everyone else as well, so that way you hit all the key marks that's required.
Got to say, you really have the best questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, seriously, like I really appreciate this discussion. This is a
Thank
really
you.
great discussion. I'm really enjoying it. I hope I'm at least giving you answers that are, that are helpful to some extent, not
Yes, yes, they are.
cliches. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, when you're producing, like for example, the last one that I produced with Jeff is Killcraft. Like that's the last one. Like which shot in when did it shoot? Well, this year. It shot in
Okay.
July. So
Okay.
we're still editing. We've even got one more day of shooting on it. Yeah, I mean that was a very good example of that, pretty applicable to what you're talking about, because while we were shooting the film, we shot the film in Seattle, and
That's one
it's
with Bill Oberst as well too,
yeah,
right?
Bill Oberst
Yeah. Okay.
Bill Oberst, Michael Pare, and Sanaya Lutzis,
Yeah. Okay.
and and there'll be there's a couple of other cast members who are yet to be added, but even
Okay.
like bigger names. So that was a very good example, because it was I wrote the script on that one. Like that this one was solely written by myself, and it's it's kind of like a bit of a hybrid. It's a hybrid kind of like drama, action, but even got some aspects of almost horror as well. You know what I mean? Because it's because I've added some carnival-esque aspects to it. And there was one scene which I'm not really giving away anything here, but there was one occasion when I was shooting something and I was speaking to an actress, and she was telling me that she's got a daughter who is a contortionist, right? And she was saying to me, well, if you ever need a contortionist character in a movie, let me know, because she's really amazing and like a very freaky, almost like a circus act, And I remember at the time, so at the time the director side of me is going, wow, because I really love circusy stuff. I mean, that was how I first met Bill too, because we've been working for many years on a project called Circus of Dread, and
Yes.
which we will make eventually, but it's a much bigger project. And it was both of us. We have a love of of circus freaks, Lon Chaney
Right.
Jr. and just that kind of bizarre world. Anyway, so this a part of me is going, oh yeah, the idea of a contortionist, and so I'm going. Then the producer side is going, yeah, but how could that possibly be incorporated into this movie? Because how would a contortionist be relevant to this movie? Because straight away I'm going, I can't really wait for the next movie. I like the idea of trying to incorporate a contortionist into this movie. So the producer side of me is saying, how would that be relevant to this movie? The director side is saying, oh, well, yeah, let's get a contortionist into the movie. So I had to basically go away, and the two sides of myself pretty much had like a conversation about saying, is there anything in this movie that would be contextually and tonally consistent to bring that kind of element into the movie? And of course, the entry point became then Bill's character, because Bill's character is incredibly he's just an absolute like dark and multi-conflicted psychopath in the movie, at war with himself. He's really at war with himself, which in a way is a bit of a theme of all my films, like is people at war with themselves and in a way trying like hell to be their best selves, but often failing. So in this, it became then something that, okay, I know, and I won't say exactly what it became, but the contortionist character, like this contortionist girl, I found a way to sort of like attach her to Bill's character within the movie.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say that the producer side of me is probably, by the time I make the movie, a lot of the producer side stuff, I've gone through the kind of question and answer stage, of making those decisions. And definitely, I think in a way, I'm a pretty easy to work with director with producers, even when the producer is myself, because I've been on both sides. I'm not an unrealistic person. I would never sort of have that attitude of, well, no, I really do need to drive, 2,000 miles to film that leaf falling from that tree, and it's only got to be done at that tree. I know that unless you've got unlimited budgets and, that the logistics allows you to do that, that can be destructive to the rest of the movie. I think in a way, what I've learned, and it's not even just being making films now and being both sides, it's also just understanding that you're making a movie, so the decisions are always based on the goodness of the whole. The thing is, it's kind of like saying, the brain, that your stomach might want to eat 20 chocolate bars, but part of your brain, hopefully, by the time you get to a certain age, will also tell you, because you're no longer 5 years old, well, eating 20 chocolate bars, it's not just, that's also going to give you a stomach ache. You could also ultimately get diabetes. It could also stuff up your bowels and ultimately could cause other issues with your body. So maybe just eat one or two. Don't eat 20 chocolate bars. Sorry, I'm just
no worries.
Off my phone. Don't eat 20 chocolate bars. So I think you start understanding that the decisions that you're making as a producer are decisions you also make as a director, in the sense that, for example, just on the last film, remember one day on one of the major shootouts, had some very complex shootouts where people are being shot through walls. And, you build a wall, go through the wall, got to rebuild the wall. It was taking a long time. And I remember a couple of situations where I'm going, I really need another 2 hours doing this. And then I said, what are we doing after this? What's the next thing? And then I looked at it. And so then I made the decision, something? On this scene here, I don't need to do that part. And rather than it being 4 hours, I'm going to shoot that in like just two different angles. And because that's then going to give me the 2 hours here, so I can steal 2 hours from there and use the 2 hours here. To me, that's both a director decision. It's often something that the producer will come to the director or even a first AD and say, something we're running over or whatever. I'm very aware of that, and I generally don't go over on most of the films I do. Maybe, I think on this, it was like one day we went a little bit over, but then on the next day I made sure we finished a little early. And I'm very cognizant of that because I have also produced. So I don't have like a reckless attitude to it, like, oh, who cares? The producer can deal with that issue. I don't have that. I do try to bring a certain discipline to it, even though at the same time, sometimes I'll construct a film that I can make for a long time. Like I made a film years ago called Defenseless. Well, that film had like about a 60-day shoot, but that had a tiny crew. And on that one, the decision was, do I make a film with a bigger crew and with a 30-day shoot, or do you do a 60-day shoot and have a tiny crew where personally I decided, well, I'm also going to DP this one. So that means, but I decided on the 60 because I wanted to shoot a lot of the movie at magic hour. And as you know, magic hour is only a very small part of the day.
Yeah.
So, and also on that film, I spent so much time just driving with the producer, Susan, we go to very far-flung locations to like get something that was really unique. But we couldn't drag an entire crew, but we could bring 2 or 3 people because you're also accommodating people. So you make decisions that are based on what works best for the movie, and also how are you going to make the movie. So I think being a producer and a director, I think both in a way kind of help each other, because I think ultimately you've also got to be responsible to the money you have from the investors. I don't ever like going back to an investor and saying, I need more money because I blew it all on 3/4 of the movie. And I've never done that. And I hope to never do that, because, because I really respect the investor's money, and I really respect, the fact that someone is taking the risk and giving you their money to make a movie. So I owe it to them to be responsible with their money, especially when I'm not giving them a guarantee that they'll make all the money back.
Right.
I would never guarantee that, because it's very difficult to guarantee that. And most people, if they are guaranteeing that kind of thing, they're lying. So when anyone even tells me that, oh, I met these people and, they said if I put $1 million into the movie, it'll make 5 times its money back. And I said, no, I would run 1,000,000 miles away from those kind of people, because they're lying to you.
Right.
The best thing you can tell an investor is that I will be conservative in my way I spend the money. I'll be open and totally transparent in the way I make the movie. You'll be able to look at the books. You'll see how the way the money comes in. I'm open about it.
But here's what I wanted to ask you, because what you just explained to me just now, I'm fully aware of your approach when it came to respecting the investors and not lying to them, and then being upfront about what to be expecting when it comes to the returns are, and so on and so forth. But when you have, because you've developed, it sounds like to me that because you've been able to maintain a pretty consistent relationship with a number of different people that you have been very forefront with here, and then obviously they've come back to you and in some way, shape, or form to invest in the next film, or whatever the case may be. A part of me wonders, though, that when you make the films, I'm not sure, because I can't recall if I ever heard you say if you actually do this here, but I'm curious if you do, because when you look at the amount of years you've been doing this here, and then you look back about, if someone brings up a number of films they've seen you've done, let's say Purgatory Road, or in this case, I brought up with Hitman's Hero. Do you ever actually go back and think about the times what you've went through in making those films, and then actually go back and watch the movies on your own time and say, this is not as bad as I remembered, or this actually turned a lot better than I anticipated, because it's been so long since I've seen it? Or are you one of those people that once it's done, I've seen the film at its premiere, I moved on, now move on to the next project, and then no reason for me to want to go back and revisit here? Because I'm curious about what your perspective on looking back at your work and actually revisiting it, and kind of getting your perspective how you were then and how you think of yourself now from what you have done at that point and what you saw and realized this actually turned out well. I should probably do more of this more often, or whatever the case may be. So I'm curious to see your perspective on that.
Yeah, I definitely don't take the attitude of once it's done, it's over and done, and it's kind of like it's in the past. One angle on that is, often older films get re-released, or sometimes they get released on a different format. So I'll of course be interested in seeing how it's being presented on the new format. I certainly have some films in the past that I don't watch as often, like some of the ones that are the more, say, for example, formulaic ones. And there's probably only really 2 of those, which were Fishnet and Trailer Passion, that were made in a more kind of formulaic kind of like way, like literally being given money and say, this is what we need, this, and this, and this. So, obviously I did what I could within the format, but those films I probably I probably haven't watched Fishnet probably for probably that one about 15 years. It's not one of my favorite films. Trailer Passion, I like aspects of it, but I sometimes find it kind of interesting. If I watch it again, it's rarely on my own, but it's more like watching it with someone who's never seen it. And I always find that's an interesting experience, because it's like, for example, I'm sure you have this experience too. Sometimes if you've got a favorite movie, you love to show it to someone you've just met, or hey, come and watch it. And somehow you kind of love watching them watch it. You know what I mean? Because and I'm even kind of like waiting for certain scenes to see, almost watching them, see what their reaction is, because it's almost part of you is watching it fresh when you watch it with someone who hasn't seen it
Right.
before.
Yeah.
So that sometimes helps me see a film that, for example, I may have been very harsh on, being a little bit more, a little bit more generous about. And I must admit, Hitman's Hero was a film for a long time after I made it, that, I mean, maybe all filmmakers go through stages of, really liking it and then not liking it and then liking it, not liking it. And there's a point.
I like the movie. I think it's actually one of your better films, to be frank with you.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think so too now. But at the time, because it was a very tumultuous film to make, and there was quite a lot of I mean, there was a few kind of issues related to me and the producer of the movie, because I was really the guy who brought the money to the movie. But I wasn't really that happy with the way that distribution and that kind of stuff was handled, because back at that time, I sort of allowed someone to kind of like take too much of a lead, and I sort of stepped aside thinking, well, they know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And what they knew really wasn't as much as I thought they knew. So in a way, I think it kind of sabotaged some of the opportunities that the film could have had. So in a way, that sort of like then kind of blinded me to some of the film itself. Whereas, so in a way, so I started to like then not like certain aspects of the film. But now when I look at the film, I now kind of see it in a way, because what really made, what the film's really about is about ambition, and it's really about being a filmmaker. And so now when I watch it,
interesting,
I really see the film as being so personal and so close to what I was going through, in a way similar to, a time I had with a relationship I had with my own brother. There was a time when things weren't going well, and from that, Purgatory Road emerged.
Interesting. I think one of the things that I said it from the beginning too, that I've always picked out from your films is that especially the ones that you're actually writing, because I think you're the sole writer to Hitman's Hero, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
No, that was myself and a guy I've written quite a lot of scripts with named David Richardson.
Okay.
But I mean, we've co-written quite a bit, but he also has been going through. I mean, he was also kind of going through a similar experience, because he also was a DP, and he's directed a few things too, and he still shoots some of my films. But I mean, principally, it is a very personal, but it was very personal film.
Because of the experiences, like in this case with Hitman's Hero, when you look at that movie, you for a period of time you didn't think so highly of the film, and then you go back and revisit it and you started realizing the parallels in your real life to that movie. Yes. And you have a whole new sense of appreciation for that. Does anything change about how you in this case, from looking at that film, that your perception changed about, okay, so now that I've noticed this actually works, so therefore I'm going to try something of this sort again and be able to not necessarily take something from your life, but to add into the movie, but really more or less about looking at how you may have had a different perception on something that you weren't so high on, and then all of a sudden, because of that film or something you may have seen that you've done in the past, change your perception, realize, what, before I wasn't into this, now I'm going to try doing this instead and see how that will work with my sensibilities, if you will.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, and I think in a way, there's a cliche piece of advice, and I never quite understood it when I first used to hear it, and I think it comes from writers, which is write what you know. Now, of course, when someone says write what you know, the literal interpretation is, yeah, but I'm writing about a hitman. I've never been a hitman. How can I write what I know? But no, I think write what you know, to me, I think how it's best interpreted as, if you can plug yourself into, the universal truths about yourself and your own struggles, then other people are going to also be able to relate to it as well. Because, for example, Hitman's Hero is about someone sort of like in a crazy, almost irrational way, being committed to a goal. And anyone who's ambitious believes that, and anyone who's ambitious relates to that. And no amount of people telling them that it's a fool's errand, or no amount of people telling them that, you really should try something else, are going to be sidetracked by people trying to argue in a pragmatic way about why you shouldn't do something, because ambition is not pragmatic.
Right.
If it was pragmatic, it wouldn't be something that obsesses us, because we would basically talk ourselves out. So
interesting.
I look at something like, what I did with that, and then say, for example, I guess if I look at the films that I think in a way maybe my most successful dramatic films, like, and I think are the ones where I've got so much of myself in those movies, and that's definitely Hitman's Hero, or Sense of New Age Killer, and Purgatory Road.
So to you, those are your two most personal films you've done out of all the films you've done so
Definitely,
far?
yeah, I'd say definitely the two most. I'd say definitely the two most personal films, and then I'd say then after that I'd say the film that I just made, which is Killcraft, is also very personal, and I won't explain right now why,
Right.
but you just see it. But I was very plugged into something about the making of that movie, about the general story of that movie that was straight from me, but obviously, was. I don't always kind of like to do it, like in a kind of like a literal sense, because which you can, because then it becomes more like a Ken Loach film. You know what I mean? Which is fine too. I like a lot of his films. You know what I mean? Because but he'll deal with stuff that's more literal. He'll deal
Right.
with someone. For example, they may be getting a certain kind of welfare. They have an accident, and then they find that their welfare gets cut off. Their life falls into ruins, and then it then addresses it. It then becomes about one person fighting a system that's not flexible. Whereas I like the idea of using it, of kind of like slightly shifting what the real issues are, into not a literal scenario. Like in the same way, as I said, there was a time when my brother and I, were, because he's a younger brother, I'm the older brother, and there was a time when we had there was a lot of conflict going on between us, which what helped me understand the conflict was writing the script, with Tom Parnell.
Mhm.
But again, it was interesting because Tom Parnell wrote the script with me, but that was more a script that I generated, but he then wrote with me. But then Painkiller was one more that he generated, and
Right.
then I wrote with him. You know what I mean? So the driving force was more Tom. The driving force of Purgatory was more me, even though we both also contributed to the writing. The writing of kind of each other's more personal project.
I think a lot of people may not truly realize, and I hope you don't mind me asking this question, but because the thing is that what I was hoping you can kind of elaborate with your on how you go about the series, because there are there are certain people who are lifers, like their career is their life. They are focused on the career. Like, Jason Newsted, the former bassist of Metallica, like he was that his music career was his life. Like his music were his children. I've several other people who make films and music as well too. They have the same kind of mindset where their work is their family, if you will. So the reason I'm asking this about you is because clearly you've been able to maintain a pretty consistent career. I understand you do other things as well too to kind of help keep yourself afloat while you're in between productions. But the reason I'm asking this here from your perspective is because there's a reality of filmmaking, which I think in the beginning, like I'm going to use myself as an example. When at the time I wanted to be an actor, but I wanted to be an actor for all the wrong reasons, which was
Right.
the superficial stuff. Like I want to be rich and famous so I can make movies, and once as I started getting older, and when I started talking to more people in the industry, a lot of the people that I've come across that are really good at what they do aren't necessarily the most famous people, but
Yes.
they're the best at what they do.
Yes.
And then I started noticing that the story that I hear most consistent is that they've hit a lot of dry spells, but they're still grinding and putting in the work, and somehow in some way shape or form they've been able to keep afloat despite those hardships that comes with it. And in some ways it did affect their loved ones as far as the relationships are concerned, and it can be a very difficult aspect about what it is you would want in your pursuit of your passion, if you will. So the question I have for you in respects to that really has to do with the fact that when you're making a movie and you're writing on a film, I understand that there is some sort of satisfaction you get out of it, but when it comes to the other side of your passion, is there something that you've noticed about yourself that maybe before you probably didn't notice before about the relationships you have with somebody, whether it be direct family members or spouses, whatever the case may be. And then as you go on throughout the years and you start to realize that, you know, this area of my life isn't, I'm still trying to figure this out, but I know this part of my life, I know what I want and I'm going to stick with this, because there's a balancing act that I figured out with a lot of people who make films and whatever endeavors they follow through here, that it's either you have a good support system or it's all on you to figure out what works best for you and you figure out what makes you happy and you stick with that. So I'm curious about your perspective on the amount of work that you put in here because quite frankly, when I looked at your filmography, I was surprised to see how many films you've actually have done. And I was trying to get as many films as I could before I got to speak with you because I wanted to get a an idea of like where you started and where you've ended up now so far to see what has changed throughout the years. And you know, the two things, and it's funny because you mentioned before about how Hitman's Hero is your one of your most postal films. Because when I saw Purgatory Road and then I saw Hitman's Hero, I was like, this movie feels to me to be like his. I at least at this point right now, I felt like it's your second best film that I've come across here so far. Because there's something about that movie that spoke to me about you that I picked up from Purgatory Road, which is kind of odd that you mentioned that here to me. So, but again, that's something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily truly understand when it comes to the amount of work that's involved and how that would have an effect on them in some way or shape or form when it comes to the relationship. But you've still been able to make consistent with that. And to me, you seem pretty even keel about the whole thing where you seem happy, but I'm curious about how the hardships of going through your artistic endeavors and then how that has an effect on your relationship and how you learn to deal with that now moving forward because of the years of experience you've had because of what you've been in, what you've been through from when you first started to where you are with it now. So I hope you don't mind the question, but I hope you can try to share some insights about how you balance that out to find an even keel with your life and in that respect.
Yeah, again, it's a very really good discussion point that you raise. Yeah, it's nothing really. Nothing in my early years kind of prepared me for the, for the journey. That because my journey is not like, for example, as I said, one of my early mentors was Richard Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
He had his journey and he went from this film to that film, then to Hollywood, made a few films there, then went back to Australia, made a few films, and then unfortunately died at a fairly young age. Like he died in his 60s. I think that it's hard to, when you make a commitment to something, like I always wanted to, like, first ambition was really be a writer at a very young age. I had several correspondence relationships with well-known writers, one with James Herbert, who was a horror writer.
Like the Stephen King version of the UK.
Yeah, the British.
Yeah.
He wrote The Rats, The Fog, not the Carpenter Fog, but The Fog. And I wrote to him from when I was 15 years old and until about, I don't know, on and off, for like 10 years. I met him a couple of times. Yeah, anyway, so I was always writing, and then eventually I love films, so I thought I want to do films. And yeah, it's pretty much the only thing that really fired me up. But I'd say that the thing that you love, you also have a love-hate relationship with, because the thing you love is what causes you the most pain. In the same way that if you're, say, for example, let's say even in a relationship, whether it's your child, your wife, husband, whatever, they can hurt you more than, and I mean hurt, they could just say something that's hurtful. Like even, your own, even your own father can say, you disappoint me, son. That hurts. And there's love. And so it's the people you love, the things you love, that can also cause you the most pain because you care a lot.
Right.
So I've always, in a way, taken a fairly unconventional path. Like even in Australia, like most people were getting their films financed through government film bodies.
Right.
But I couldn't do that because the government film bodies were not sympathetic to the kind of films I wanted to make. They kind of like, they would criticize and kind of like, in a way, demean action films, horror films. They just thought it was almost like porno. It was like, to them, it was almost like a porno genre.
Like throwaway, pretty much.
Yeah, and I remember that particular point came home to me one day, because I remember getting some script funding for a children's film that I wrote called The Orphan Factory, which I got close to making, and I'd like to make it one day. But I remember meeting someone at the film body, and they said, "Oh, it's really good to meet you." And then they just whispered to me, "So this is something very different from the normal porno films that you make, right?" And I said, "What porno films do I make?" And they said, isn't that what you do? I said, no, well, I do action and, horror and, oh, okay, cool. I didn't realize that, so it was kind of interesting, how people perceive that if you're not, that if you're not kind of juiced into the government film bodies, you're kind of like in this ghetto of like irrelevant films. And that was kind of, in a way, part of the reason why I eventually decided, right, I've got to come back to the States to work, because this was after making Hitman's Hero and after making Defenseless, the last one I made in Australia. Then I moved here because I had a box set of my films that had come out at the time. And right. The company behind it, this amazing guy named Norm Hill, was one of the first people here to ever look at my films that I'd made in Australia. And he just made me an offer and he said, I love your movies, which to me, I'd never heard anyone saying that, because in Australia, it was very hard to, make an imprint, even though, Hitman's Hero did get pretty decent release and got released by 20th Century Fox on video and all that. But, it's always, I think when you take a path where it's about making movies your own way, it's going to have a certain struggle attached to it, and you've got to be committed to that struggle. And it is always a struggle, and a lot of other things do suffer, and it's just kind of like, and that's almost not unexpected, because you can't expect to devote so much time to one thing and then not have other things suffer. I mean, more so, maybe more than ever now, I definitely try to have, my balance is more like maybe exercise and making sure I eat well and that type of thing. Because there was a time when I, for many years, I think I, barely slept. I was just editing all the time and shooting all the time. And I never lost, the passion for me is never gone. I started making Super 8s, so the thing is, my passion for filmmaking has never left me. I've got the same passion now that I had when I made my very, very first Super 8 movies. But yeah, things do suffer. And so you learn to kind of like, live in a fairly, frugal way. Mm-hmm. You learn that you need to prioritize certain things in order to get tasks done. And you also find other things, in between. Most of my in between things are still related, but I also shoot docos and interview subjects for Blu-ray companies and things like that. Like I've done quite a lot of that kind of thing, and at the same time too, I'm also, even now, I'm shooting like a very, very lower budget film too that I'm shooting myself. I still also like the idea of doing that even in between the films that are the bigger films, and even the bigger films that are not huge films. I've just got this absolute kind of like just unlimited kind of like drive to tell stories and make films, and just try to find any way to tell a story. If there's a way to do it, if it's kind of like, well, I've only got this amount of money to do it, I'm good at assessing whether, okay, that can work. I probably can't do that with it, but I can do that, But yeah, it can be a lonely existence,
right?
Because even when you're directing, sometimes it's very lonely because not everybody understands what you're doing. I've had other directors talking about this. It can be very lonely because sometimes you've got something in your head that you're trying to convey, and everyone's kind of looking at you like, huh? Because no one kind of knows how it's going to be cut.
So they don't speak that language, basically.
Yeah, and you try to, as much as possible, convey it. But sometimes you do just have to say, look, guys, just trust me. Let's just do it. Because hopefully you're hiring people who are there to help you realize your vision, right, but who also can bring something of themselves to the vision as well. That's the people I try to hire, that people who not only are they there to help you, who are very good technicians, but they're also people who can problem solve, because a lot of filmmaking is problem solving, right. We can't shoot there. We've now only got an hour. Before we had 3 hours. What do? You find a way to deal with it. Right. Oh, the gun jammed. We can't do any blanks here. What's another way to shoot this scene without having to, but firing a gun, but without actually not being able to see a blank? Just stuff you don't deal with as much now because you can put in post muzzle flashes and things like that. But yeah, you're always dealing with problems. But I would say, there's a certain isolated aspect to when you're making movies, because even though it's very much a group effort, but everybody is also looking to you, to have answers. but at the same time, you're not always got the energy to explain everything, especially when sometimes you're shooting things out of sequence. So, everything doesn't always have to make sense in a larger sense to other people. It's more just like, this is a shot I need now. Then we're going to get that shot. Then we're going to get that shot, and you involve people in the process as much as you can. But sometimes you'll see doubt on people's faces. And sometimes you even, have periods, especially when it gets late in the night and you see people losing concentration. You can't lose concentration, because obviously when you're directing, you're on set working all the time. You've got to be focused all the time. Right. Whereas other people, especially like even actors can do their scene and then go and sit down for 2 hours. Whereas, they at least get that break sometimes. Whereas when you're directing, you don't really get the break. And the same kind, a lot of the crew people don't get a break either, like especially gaffers, gaffers and grips. I mean, they're some of the just most constantly working people in the movie because, they're always, always on their feet. It's a very labor heavy job. But mentally, I'm probably to some extent, I'm probably a bit of a psycho in my head, but I try to, but I believe that I don't let the psycho out of my head, but it comes out in the creativity, that I don't pretend to be saying I wouldn't recommend to anyone to, carry my brain around in your head for a day. I don't think most people would be able to, probably deal with that, but I'm used to it. I'm used to what, my brain seems to want and need, and being able to manage it because I'm able to kind of partition things. Got to work this, got to work that, and also a lot of the time I'm directing, writing. Not always involved completely in the edit at the beginning, but of course, once there's some type of assembly, then I'm heavily involved. And I'm probably like a lot of directors. I've had a lot of experience editing too. So my notes are quite extensive, and I have a good instinct about, okay, that needs 2 frames off. There's 2-3 frames there that shouldn't be there. That needs to be lengthened by a frame. Just that 1 frame is killing that cut. That will work without that. Eventually you just kind of get a feel for like what's working. But it's isolating, and it's not the kind of stress that you can't really bring it home and discuss it. After you've had a very heavy day, you really just want to sleep because right away, the moment you go to sleep, you're going to be waking up 5 or 6 hours later and you're straight to the same thing again. Right. You're back to the set again. So, I just try to be, hopefully I'm a little bit more calm than I used to be. I've never been a screaming person, but at the same time, I'm also can be very intolerant of, idiotic people, but I think that's a good thing. I don't think we should be tolerant of idiotic people because it only encourages more idiots, but, I think in a way, when you have a good team, you have a good team. So the isolation or the loneliness sometimes that you feel is hopefully mitigated by the fact that if you've got a good team, then you don't feel as alone, which is why it's great having like a DP that you're really close with or a producer you're really close with, because, at times it might feel like you against the world, but it's always better when it's you and someone else against the world. You know what I mean? Like it's a great feeling. And that's why picking the people that you collaborate with is absolutely key to not just making, decent movies, but by having a healthy career. And, and I still think, films can make people very crazy. Right. But that's why I just think that as long as you understand that it can make you crazy and you're not in denial about that, as long as you can stand back a little bit and kind of know that this is kind of insane, I need to step back, I need to go for a walk, I need to just do something else for an hour or so, then you can maintain some sort of sanity because, there's a lot of stuff going on in your head and you're getting a lot of stuff out because also when you're making the movie, at least from my point of view, I'm trying to make a movie that I would want to watch.
Right.
Because why would I want to make a movie I wouldn't want to watch? How could I then expect other people to want to watch it?
So there's a question that I want to ask you about this because you brought something up about how you're working with people that, are more or less kind of joining the fight, if you will. And it certainly does help out with not feeling lonely during the process as well, too. So the question I want to ask you is that if, say, for example, if, you had you're making your movies and you're constantly getting, you're getting work, but if you're not getting people who are on your side in terms of like, okay, we're going to help you with your vision. We don't get it, but we'll do what you say. And then when they see like, okay, now it makes sense. Now we trust your vision. We trust what you're trying to say because it didn't make sense before. We get it now. But if you hadn't had more or less more of those positive experiences with, almost every set or every other set, whatever the case may be, do you think you probably would have lasted as long and still making movies, even though you still had a passion for it? But do you think you still would have made it last as long in the business if you hadn't had those strong relationships that you have developed throughout the years with the various people you work with and in the various projects you've worked on as well too?
Yeah, because I think there's part of me that's always going to try to remedy a bad situation and turn it into a positive. I think ultimately, I think I'm kind of like psychotically optimistic. So part of the optimism is part of optimism is there's a psychotic aspect to optimism or a sociopathic aspect to optimism, because optimism is basically based on beliefs and it's not necessarily based on facts. If someone says, well, are you optimistic about that? I mean, they're not asking you to consider facts a lot of the time. They're simply saying, what's your general feeling about that? So, like Francis Ford Coppola, are you optimistic about making Apocalypse Now halfway through the making of it? You watch Heart of Darkness.
Yeah.
And there's obviously still something optimistic in the guy that's going, I've got to finish this off, because if he's completely pessimistic about it, he's not going to have the drive. He's not going to have the drive to do it. So I would say that with me, because I've always been so much, I feel so addicted to this, and it is like an addiction. It's a drug.
Right.
Because I'm so addicted to it, I would say that no matter what the situation, I would always have been wanting to try to find a way to keep making it work. And the thing is, I've never, for example, had a situation where someone's come to me, and offered me an ungodly amount of money, like $100 million for something, you know what I mean? Because I've never had a massive, huge runaway hit. I mean, most filmmakers have not had the massive runaway hits. That's a very small minority of people who've had huge runaway hits. So the thing is, with each film, even though you've had experience and you've got runs on the board, you're still kind of like starting from scratch to some extent, because you're still making a case of why the film needs to be made, because, your experience is what helps you make it efficiently. But it's not like you can say, well, I once made a film that made, $100 million off $10,000, so give me some money. Because that's more like a Robert Rodriguez thing that he was able to do when he made, El Mariachi, because even though technically we know that's not really made for $8,000, because by the time the studio gets it and basically bumps it up to 35, does the sound mix, it's no longer really it's not really an $8,000 movie, but the myth is $8,000 movie. And clearly it was $8,000 to get it to a certain point where someone saw it.
Yeah.
But we all know that, to get a film to the point that it's being in 1,000 theaters by Columbia Pictures, that's not $8,000 that was spent doing that. You know what I mean? So there's more money to do that. So, but he was able to make that case. But most filmmakers can't make that same case of literally a 1 to 100 ratio of profit and to justify the rest of their lives, getting money for films, because even people who've had hit movies eventually have trouble getting films financed. Even John Carpenter ran into that. I mean, John Carpenter did Halloween, which had a huge, cost to profit ratio. But then the last feature he made, which I think was a film called The Ward,
that was from 2011, I think it was.
That's a much smaller budget. The budget started going down because also his films weren't making as much money as they used to. And he also made The Thing, a classic, a masterpiece, but again, that wasn't a box office hit. So in a way, everybody is often in a way shot back to the starting line at some point where you've got to kind of start again. And I mean, I really see filmmaking as being a boxer. Like I see my life as I just keep getting punched down onto the canvas. Sometimes I get up and I take a few swings. But I feel like, a lot of filmmakers, certainly myself, I'm bloody Jake LaMotta, basically the difference is Jake never went down, but some of his, some of the guys that he, that was his claim. I never went down. I never
Yeah,
went
yeah,
down.
yeah.
But the whole point is, I think we're boxers. We're boxers getting up and fighting again. You keep getting punched, so you then say to yourself, "What makes me keep getting back up when I keep getting punched in the face? Is that sane?"
Interesting. I actually never thought of him from that perspective. Now that you just mentioned it here, but that's actually a beautiful point that you just made. Here's what I wanted to just kind of say up with closing off here with you, because I was very much looking to this conversation here with you because um, what I like to do is I like to do as much research as I can with who I'm speaking with here, so that way I get a feel for how they conduct themselves in the conversation, what's been discussed, what has been asked and has been asked, so on and so forth. And then obviously look into the projects they've worked on as well too. And one of the things that I've noticed right away in every single interview that you do is that you share a great amount of detail with the various questions that are asked of you, and then you share more than I guess people would anticipate. So it was hard for me to kind of figure out what I could do to be able to make the conversation interesting for you, because the one thing I never want to do is have someone walk away and be like, you know, forget the conversation. I generally do want to have someone to come on and converse with me and then be able to feel as if though they were part of when I watch your films, you're part of the journey. You're part of the you can see the passion, and this field that I'm in right now, that I love this so much that I've started to learn a way to be able to fine tune certain details, that where I struggled with certain things, I work hard on, so that way when you come on, or if I know all the things that have been asked of you, what could I do to make it more interesting? That's always the most challenging thing for me to be able to learn to overcome, because it's always interesting for me to see if I'm able to accomplish that with who I'm talking to. Because if there's wonderful guests I've had on the show, and there's several of them that are great talkers, but then you can find someone who does not have that same type of momentum in the conversation, and you got to find a way to find something
Sure.
to pull out of them. So I was expecting for you to be able to share a great amount of details and actually go more in depth in areas that I think was very fulfilling for me to understand why I connected with your movies when I listened to you talk, because I can see the personalities in your films as I'm listening to you talk and we're conversing here. And and I'm when you mentioned before about how you that I was asking you great questions, I was like, okay, great. So then not to say I feel fulfilled, but it was great to hear that, because that what I wanted to make sure that I was able to accomplish with you is that I really wanted to pull out something that I've either heard before but wasn't delved into, or to pull out something that I found interesting that I wish was delved into, that I could help to get more perspective from what I think is the most interesting thing about you that I picked up from your films, to really elaborate further here. So I really do appreciate you in sharing that here with me, because there's so much about what you had shared that really got me thinking. And the beautiful thing about this conversation that I had with various guests is that if I can always walk away with thinking about what you just said and carry that with me, and I mean every time I say that, I think that's one of the biggest accomplishments that I can achieve, as far as being able to take away something that you have bestowed onto me, in terms of like the various things that I've asked of you, and you leave me something to really think about, to harness, and to hold on to them, and to say. And I know I'm kind of going long winded here, but there's just a lot that you've got me thinking about that I didn't really necessarily think about, in terms of how you looked at it, and being able to share that with me, and got me to look at things a little more differently. The whole boxer analogy was something I never thought of before until you brought that up. And that's actually a very valid point, that I'm hoping that whoever comes across here can, well, let's listen to that and understand that perspective, and why it makes sense for me to connect with it. Whether you're an athlete or not, I think you can still understand that point of view
Yes.
here. So, this is me essentially giving you your flowers for what you have done here, because I really do believe that you're a great filmmaker. Because, as I said before in the beginning, that when Gary had insisted on trying to get you and Lewis to work together, Lewis Mandler is literally one of my favorite actors of all time. After I saw the performance in Debt Collectors,
Yep.
I was like, this guy is amazing. Then I realized, I've seen some of his other stuff before, and then I became a fan of ever since. I've been able to
Right.
talk with him before as well too, and understanding how Lewis' mindset works, And then for Gary to say, you should work with this guy, I was like, okay, there's a good reason for that.
Yes.
So
Right.
being able to see what I've heard you say before in the past and seeing your work so far, I could see where the connection is, where you guys were, where Gary had wanted you guys to work, because you guys were able to bring something that could be, what's the best I could say? Hopefully, do something unique in that respect is is the best way I could say it
Yeah.
here.
Well,
So
I appreciate Gary introducing also us and him asking, suggesting that we have a chat. Because also to me too, both Gary and Lewis to me are just both extraordinary actors.
yeah,
And when I was talking before about names,
Yeah.
people who are like approved names by distributors, there's no argument in the world for me that would be able to talk me out of putting them in any film imaginable and them excelling in any role, because they're both just that special.
Yes.
And they've both got different degrees of also, I mean, at the moment they've both got different degrees of recognition, and because it's that same thing about that, unless the audience or unless distributors see you in something that is a big hit or whatever, you don't get as much attention. And I would just love to see as more and more, both of them just getting more and more recognition, so that it can also carry them into bigger films, but also not just necessarily bigger films, but just giving them greater challenges themselves in terms of roles. Because to me, that's one of the greatest. To me, I'm always excited to send a script to an actor, and hoping that they respond, to the script. It's not just me thinking, oh, I just want to work with that person. Yeah, but I try to be respectful that I would never send them something if I didn't think it was something that in some way really bring out their best.
Yeah.
I mean, that's important. So they deserve to have good material. That's my point. That if and so because we all want to work with good material. So it was wonderful of Gary to do that, because I have huge respect for Gary, and I have huge respect for Louis, and I really appreciate also what you've asked me and discussed in this too, because we've been able to air some very interesting, explore some really interesting areas.
I am very appreciative that you share and give me some insight about some things that, like I said before, it leaves me a lot to think about here, because what's interesting for me is that I do plan on going back and digging more of your filmography here as well. But hearing your perspective on that, it's always fun for me to talk to a director and they give me something to think about. And I look back at their films and now it makes more sense why certain things were done a certain way. So I can click with it better. Because sometimes I think I got it, but then, I told you before about Hitman's Hero, which so far, in my opinion, is your second best film, because there's something about that movie that I clicked with right away. But I also felt like I felt like there was something about that film that spoke more about your personality, but I just couldn't figure out what that was. So now that you mentioned it, I plan on going watching it again and seeing that overall.
Yeah. It'll be very, very obvious when you watch it again. Probably.
Right. So, and I think that's another interesting factor for me to look into as well too. So, so for the camera, I'm going to just say that this was a wonderful conversation. I was looking forward to it, and I actually told my wife too this earlier this week, is I'm going to speak with the director of Purgatory Road. I'm super excited for this one. She's like, "Is that the one with Gary Kern?" I was like, "Yeah, it's a great movie." I was saying all these high things about it, but this was like this was really something that I was really looking forward to, and I expected a great conversation. I had no doubt it was going to be. It was not going to be. I had no doubt it was going to be a great conversation, but I was hoping it was going to be even better than I anticipated. And this was something that I definitely did get out of this conversation so far here with you. So I appreciate you doing that here with me. So again, for the cameras, I want to say thank you. And I would love to have this conversation with you again down the line here. So any upcoming work that you have coming down the pipeline here, I would love to help promote it as well too, talk about the film as well, to review it as well. And just go more in depth in some other areas of your career that I hope that we can elaborate further here, because there's so much more that I think you have shared, even with the various interviews you've done. I always feel like that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that you could share, but there's only so much time we have to do so here. So, but either way, I appreciate you sharing what you have so far here. So thank you for that.